Inheritance. Audio by Paper to Audio. Inheritance. The rain smelled like old memories, like the first time Thomas lost his grandfather. It wasn't a violent rain, not a storm, just a persistent gray drizzle that seemed to cling to everything in Havenwood, coating the slate roofs and the overgrown roses in a sheen of melancholy. He'd been sitting on the porch swing, nursing a mug of lukewarm tea, watching the rain fall, and the feeling had returned, a quiet, insistent ache in his chest, a sense of something profoundly missed. It wasn't grief, not exactly. It was more like a phantom limb, a space where a significant piece of his life used to be, stubbornly refusing to fade. He reached out and touched the worn wood of the swing, tracing the familiar grain with his thumb, seeking a connection to the past, a whisper of his grandfather's presence. He'd inherited the house, a rambling Victorian on the edge of town, after his grandfather's passing 5 years ago. It was a beautiful, melancholic place, full of books and the scent of beeswax and pipe tobacco. His parents had wanted him to sell it, to move to the city, to start a real life, but something about the house, about the quiet rhythm of its existence, had held him captive. He'd convinced them to let him keep it, promising to fix it up, to make it his own. He'd spent the last 5 years slowly, meticulously, filling the house with the things he needed: books, a comfortable armchair, a collection of old photographs, trying to build a life within its walls. A life that felt, somehow, a little closer to the one his grandfather had known. The tension began subtly, a tightening in his shoulders as he was weeding the rose bushes. It wasn't a sharp, immediate pain, but a low-grade discomfort, like a forgotten pressure point. He'd been trying to prune back the crimson glory, a particularly unruly bush that his grandfather had cherished, and he realized with a jolt that he was doing it with a certain hesitation, a lack of instinct. He moved his hand, carefully clipping a stem, and a small, iridescent beetle, a scarab he thought, landed on the rosebush, briefly pausing before taking flight. He stared at it for a long moment, a strange sense of recognition washing over him, though he couldn't quite place it. He started spending more time in the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with his grandfather's belongings. There were old tools, a collection of vintage postcards, and a leather-bound journal filled with meticulously written observations about the natural world, birds, insects, the changing seasons. He'd read through the journal, captivated by his grandfather's quiet appreciation for the small, everyday wonders of life. He noticed, as he read, that his grandfather had a habit of writing about the rain, particularly the way it seemed to amplify the colors of the landscape. "The rain," he'd written in one entry, "always washes the world clean, revealing its hidden beauty." The rain continued for days, a steady, insistent presence. He started to notice things he hadn't before: the way the light filtered through the stained glass window in the hallway, the subtle scent of lavender that clung to the old curtains, the way the shadows stretched long and distorted across the floor in the afternoon sun. He'd find small objects, a smooth river stone, a feather, a dried flower, tucked into unexpected places, as if left there deliberately. He began to feel a growing sense of connection to his grandfather, not as a memory, but as a presence, a gentle guide. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of old photographs, he found a picture of his grandfather as a young man, standing in a field of sunflowers, a wide, joyful smile on his face. He noticed a small, silver locket hanging around his neck. He remembered his grandmother telling him that his grandfather always wore it, a gift from her mother. He picked up the locket and opened it. Inside were 2 tiny portraits, his grandfather and his great-grandmother. He traced the faces with his finger, a sudden wave of sadness and longing washing over him. He had always felt a disconnect, an unbridgeable gap between himself and his ancestors. He considered selling the house, he truly did. The upkeep was relentless, the isolation profound. His friends in the city called, urging him to come visit, to experience real life. He felt a rising tide of doubt, a nagging feeling that he was wasting his time, clinging to a past that could never be fully recovered. Was he honoring his grandfather's memory, or was he simply trapped by sentimentality? He imagined his parents' voices, their quiet disappointment, and the familiar ache in his chest intensified. He spent a sleepless night, pacing the length of the house, the rain drumming against the windows, amplifying his confusion. The next morning, he woke with a strange sense of clarity. He went downstairs, made himself a cup of tea, and sat down at the kitchen table, staring out at the rain-soaked garden. He realized that the tension he'd been feeling wasn't about his grandfather's absence, it was about his own. He'd been trying to fill the void with objects, with memories, but he hadn't been truly present, hadn't been allowing himself to grieve, to accept the loss. He'd been so focused on preserving the past that he'd forgotten to live in the present. The beetle he'd seen the previous day suddenly made sense. It wasn't just a random encounter. It was a reminder of his grandfather's quiet appreciation for the beauty of the natural world, a subtle invitation to slow down, to observe, to connect. He began to spend his days not trying to replicate his grandfather's life, but simply existing alongside it, absorbing its essence. He tended the rose bushes with a newfound gentleness, noticing the delicate curve of the petals, the intricate patterns of the leaves. He read his grandfather's journal, not with longing, but with gratitude, understanding his grandfather's perspective. He started a small garden of his own, planting wildflowers and herbs, following the same principles of sustainable gardening that his grandfather had documented. He began to notice the small, everyday miracles, the way the sunlight streamed through the trees, the sound of the birds singing, the scent of the rain on the earth. He realized that his grandfather hadn't left him a legacy of possessions, but a legacy of perspective, a way of seeing the world with wonder and appreciation. The locket, he understood, wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of connection, a reminder that he wasn't alone. He felt a warmth spreading through his chest, a sense of peace and acceptance. The rain continued to fall, but now it sounded less like a lament and more like a gentle lullaby. He went back to the attic and opened the journal one last time. He found a final entry, written just days before his grandfather's death. The most important thing, he'd written, is not to fear the silence, but to listen to the whispers of the world. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, and closed the journal, placing it carefully back in its place. He understood then that he wasn't replacing his grandfather. He was carrying him forward, not in a tangible way, but in the way he lived his life, with kindness, compassion, and a deep appreciation for the simple joys of existence. The feeling of safety solidified in him. It wasn't about the house or the memories, but about the quiet strength he'd found within himself, a strength rooted in connection, acceptance, and the enduring beauty of the world around him. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he was finally home. You have reached the end of the text.